Here are the two Steve Rogers figures that we've gotten by Hasbro. The first one is from the Return of Marvel Legends era, from the Terrax BAF Wave. And this new one is from the very recent Totally Awesome Hulk BAF Wave. Here's a quick look at the packaging of the new Steve Rogers figure. Front, the BAF on one side, the artwork on the other side, and the back. The Terrax Wave Steve Rogers actually has a variant, one with the normal shield, and the other one with the translucent shield. The figure is the same, but the paintwork is different. The one with the translucent shield has lighter brown on the pouches, boots, and gloves. And here I have both of the shield, the normal variant and the translucent variant. I've sold away the figure of the translucent variant, and the figure also comes with a pair of guns. The gun has a unique mold at the bottom of the front part here, which I think makes it look quite cool. And the figure comes with trigger finger hands for the gun. The new one only comes with a translucent shield. No alternate hands at all, no guns, nothing else. For the Terrax Wave, these two shields have the same exact mold, with the inner side having this sculpt over here. For the new shield, it is just very slightly smaller than the previous one, and you can see the previous one has kind of yellowed over time. On the inner side, the new one doesn't have any sculpt at all, and the clip is actually smaller than the previous one. And another difference is that on the previous version, it is actually sculpted. Each of the circle is sculpted, the star, and also the outer red circle. It is all sculpted, slightly elevated, but for the new shield, it is just totally flat. The red is just paintwork, unlike this one, which has a sculpt. Overall, the new one isn't bad, but I prefer the previous one, except that it has yellowed. So I guess I'll just have to stick to the new one. And because the clip is small on the new shield, you really got to be careful. The old shields have a tendency of the pegs breaking. So for me, I would put it on the wrist over here. I would push up the wrist strap and, clip it somewhere there. Like so. I wouldn't clip it close to the forearm because, I wouldn't want the clip to break. And for the hands, it's really such a waste that the new one doesn't have any trigger finger hand, and we can't really use this hand because this is one whole piece. Yeah, there isn't any wrist articulation on this previous figure, just the forearm swivel. Now, for his appearance, there are a few things to talk about. First up are the heads. When the picture of the new figure first came out, it kind of looks quite terrible, doesn't really look that great. Something about it is just kind of off. But now that I have the figure in hand, it actually isn't so bad and quite comic accurate to this appearance actually, just that the parting of the hair is on the other side. The head sculpt of the previous version isn't bad at all. Looks a bit like John Cena actually. So in terms of head sculpt, both of them are okay in my opinion. The new one definitely doesn't look as bad as the promotional pictures. And up close, it brings us to the torso. This star is kind of too small, and this one is sized better. In the comics, the star on his chest has always looked quite big. One thing about the previous figure is that there isn't a star on the shoulder ball, and the new one actually fixed that. The previous one has the hinge joint exposed, but the newer one doesn't have the hinge joint exposed, so it's really looking good that the star can be painted on it clearly. I've actually seen a video of someone painting a star on this shoulder ball, but it still doesn't look good because when you lift up the arm, the stars wouldn't be aligned. The new one has the strap going across the back, but the previous one doesn't, and that's because for the previous version, the strap is actually glued along the shoulders. But the newer one, it is actually a separate piece which can be taken off. And here's how he looks like without the strap. Another thing about the arms is that the previous one doesn't have the lines painted. The newer one has it, but in the comics, sometimes he has been drawn with the line and without the line. Or maybe the lines were not obvious, so it doesn't really matter to me whether the line is there or not. Both the belts look similar, but they are sculpted slightly differently. The newer one has more silver at the buckle area, and the newer one has a shorter loop at the side over here compared to the previous version. There's also a pouch sculpted at the previous version. The newer one doesn't have that. And for the gloves, the previous version has holes along the knuckles, but the newer one doesn't. And the wrist strap has the buckle painted for the previous version. For the newer one, the buckle on the wrist strap isn't painted. And all the way down to the boots, the newer one has more sculpt. You can see the more obvious sculpted lines compared to the previous version. But both of them looks okay actually. And the main difference is actually near the ankle area over here. The new one actually have the brown part sculpted over the shoes, which is really kind of comic accurate actually, compared to the previous version, which has this part separate from the foot. There. And again, the buckles on the boots are not painted, unlike the previous version. The previous version has laces sculpted. The newer one doesn't have those laces. And of course, lastly, the newer one, the shade of blue is lighter than the previous version. I think both blue looks okay, but I prefer the blue on the newer figure because at the very least, it looks more obvious that it's blue. Even though in the comics, he has kind of like black shading or stuff, it looks kind of darker blue, but this one makes it obvious that it is dark blue instead of black. The previous version is kind of very close to being black. It is possible to swap the heads because the ball pack is actually the same size. But the neck on this figure is kind of longer compared to the previous figure. The skin color on the neck is painted over the blue, so it isn't exactly the same as the head, slightly kind of darker, but when you have the head on, you can't really see the neck anyway, so that's fine. And this is how the figures look like with the head swapped. The new head definitely sits too low on the neck of the previous figure, and the old head sits too high on the new figure. Look at that. No neck Steve Rogers. So if you happen to have an extra of this previous head, you would need to Dremel the hole inside the head a bit deeper to make it sit better at the neck. And for some size comparison, here is US Agent. They have the same torso and bicep and thigh. 80th anniversary, Captain America, about the same height, but the head sculpt looks slightly smaller. The recent Ultimate Cap, which is an awesome figure by the way. And Toy Biz Face Off Captain America, which is definitely shorter. So overall, I think the new figure is really good, more comic accurate compared to the previous one. The head sculpt is decent, unlike how it seems to look like in the promotional picture. But the main downside is that it doesn't come with any other accessories besides the shield. An alternate pair of trigger finger hands and a pair of guns would have made the figure so much better. And I don't think any other figures has similar hand to this figure, having the brown half glove on the hands. So if you want to have a pair of trigger finger hands, you would have to repaint a pair of trigger finger hands. Thanks for watching. Do check out my other reviews at my channel.